Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well and welcome to a new video. Today I don't really have any news to cover because there is simply nothing happening around 2042 or Battlefield in general at the moment. So I thought I'm gonna share some final thoughts that I have about the game and reflect on the past 2.5 years. One thing though, before we start, this doesn't mean that I'm not covering the game anymore or that I'm not streaming it anymore. I will still do that. Maybe not as frequent as before, but I will still do it. This is just the first time in 2.5 years that there's really nothing to cover on a Tuesday, so I thought it's perfect to make this video instead. I don't want to be extremely negative about the game or anything. I've never been and I'm not starting today. So 2042 helped me to grow this channel and opened up some opportunities like the interview with the devs I did last week. And I think when considering the poor reception of the game, especially in the first few months after its release, this whole journey went pretty well so far. Still, there are some things I have on my mind that should have went different, at least in my opinion, and that already starts with the launch of the game, or actually already with the beta. If you haven't played the beta back then, check out the link in the info box, somewhere above my forehead, or at the end of this video, where I did some comparisons between the beta and Season 4 back then, just so you know what this beta looked like. If you've played it yourself, you know what I'm talking about. The beta of 2042 was one of the worst I have ever played. I've played Battlefield 1, I've played Battlefield 5, I've even played the alpha of Battlefield 5, and they've all been better around the beta and also around the alpha already. And I can remember that the feedback to the 2042 beta was actually really bad, and that the only response from DICE and EA was that the beta build was already a few months old and doesn't represent the final game. And I do believe this statement was true, but the final game still wasn't a lot better. And I think at this point where they put out this beta that showed a very poorly made and not at all finished game, they should have delayed the release of 2042, because the catastrophe that followed was already foreseeable. And I think what they should have done instead is releasing the game as 3 games, because that's what 2042 actually is. It's not just one game, it is 3. Portal, Hazard Zone, and 2042 as multiplayer. And all of these parts could have had a chance to shine, but due to these poor decisions that were made, 2 of these parts, Hazard Zone and Portal, were pretty much dead on arrival, and the other one, the multiplayer, needed loads of life support to be turned into something decent at the end. But what's actually funny is that the only part of the game that felt somewhat finished at release and was indeed fun to play right from the start was Portal. So once they realized that they wouldn't be able to deliver a completely finished game at release, and I'm pretty sure they knew the game wasn't finished, why did they not make the decision to release Portal as a standalone game instead? As a huge hub for old Battlefield titles, or at least parts of them, to come back to life, and as a foundation for the community to create their own games and experiences. Then feed this hub frequently with more remastered maps and eras, put this whole thing out for like, I don't know, $30, maybe $35, and it's fine for a bit. This gives the players something to do, and DICE would have had a lot more time to work on 2042, on the multiplayer. Plus, Portal would have not ended up being a hub for XP and kill farming instead of a creative hub. And then 2042 itself should have been released maybe a year, maybe 1.5 years later, with a proper multiplayer and with a single player campaign to connect people directly to the narrative instead of telling it in blog posts on a website that barely anyone is reading. And then, again, a few months later, release Hazard Zone as free-to-play, because Hazard Zone was the same missed opportunity and suffered from the same bad decisions as Firestorm back then. Both of these modes had potential, but both died behind an unnecessary paywall. I'm not saying Hazard Zone could have been as successful as Warzone, for example, but it could have been a lot more successful than it actually was. And I'm really hoping that this is something they learn for the next title. When you have a game that is stuffed with loads of parts in different modes, feed it to the players in a way they can digest it, but also only when it is ready to be fed. Or a wild suggestion for a AAA title, make use of early access. put the game out as an official early access for a lower price and build it alongside community feedback, something that might have worked pretty well on the example of 2042. I mean, technically, that's what happened, because in the first year we were definitely in some kind of early access phase, but it was a very, very, very expensive early access. But that's not really what early access should be. I know there are also people complaining about games in early access when they're not polished right from the start, but there will always be someone complaining. You can never please everyone. But this still works pretty well for a lot of indie games, and I don't see a problem with AAA studios doing the same. Cause I think flagging your game officially as not fully finished and offering it for a lower price at the beginning avoids a lot of drama that is happening when you offer that same game for full price but it's still not finished. So it's just all about being transparent with your player base at this point. However, DICE still managed to turn things around, which is something that should be mentioned and that I honestly didn't expect to this extent. I thought they would drop the ball on the game a lot earlier. When looking at 2042 now and looking at the game it was at launch, it wasn't even a shell of what it is today, but I think this could have been avoided. They spent loads of time and resources to bring back features that should have been in the game right from the start. Scoreboard, for example, voice chat, several settings that were available in former titles but had to be added later in 2042, the launch maps that had to be completely reworked, even the class system should have been in the game right from the start, and I'm sure I forgot about a lot of things. The quality of the seasonal content differed a lot as well, and I felt like the peak of the game was actually around Season 4 and then slowly dropped during Seasons 5 and 6 and then plummeted with the Season 7. Because that really just feels like they scraped together everything that was not released so far and put it all into one last season simply to deliver something. I mean, I'm sure that we as the players often underestimate how much time and effort it takes to design a new map, create new seasonal content, even change gameplay mechanics and so on. But then again, we also don't earn our money with the snap of our fingers, and when putting up to $120 into a game, and I'm only talking about the release version here, not even about the seasonal content and battle passes and whatever that you've paid as well, I think it's fair that we want to get something of value in return. And I still believe that if DICE would have not had to work on all of the aforementioned things after launch, they would have had more resources to work on the live service, to maybe add a little more content here and there, or maybe even extend it by more seasons. And of course, work on Hazard Zone and Portal to simply not drop them entirely, because there was something that was a selling point of the game as well and that the players actually paid for. Still, they at least managed to turn things around for the multiplayer at the end, and I do appreciate the work that DICE and the other studios have put into this game over the past 2.5 years. The seasons, the content, the updates, all the smaller and bigger changes, tweaks and improvements that were made, and that always gave me something to talk about and something new to uncover and put into my tips and tricks videos. And even though there are still some features and mechanics that I'm personally missing, it was definitely a fun journey, and I hope that I can continue it with the next Battlefield title. I do believe that DICE, Ridgeline Games, Criterion and all the other studios that are involved in the development of the next title are capable of delivering a good Battlefield game again, and also a Battlefield that lives up to its name. But I'm also hoping that the higher-ups, the whole management, is capable of making good decisions that benefit the game and the players, and not only the investors or a short-term financial success. Because I think that's what the actual problem is. I don't think it's the developers themselves, I think it's the decisions that are made by others that don't have anything to do with the game itself or the process of creating it or the communication. Because the bad communication and missing transparency is also something that needs to be improved. Best example was the horrible way the announcement for the end of life service was made. I've already talked about it in a separate video. If you haven't seen it yet, link is in the info box. And I'm also often asked what I'm hoping for when it comes to the next Battlefield title. And the only thing I'm always saying, and that's also what I'm repeating here, is that I hope it is finished when it releases. And I also hope they work on the servers or the netcode or whatever it is that causes you to die behind cover and get random headshots or make your bullets disappear. Because you can have the best ideas for a game and the best mechanics and the most interesting setting. If the game is not finished at release and players experience a multitude of bugs and issues that make the game unplayable at some point, and especially in a shooter game, if your bullets do not arrive or your mouse or controller input feels spongy and inconsistent, like it does in 2042 right now, all of your great ideas are for nothing and will be heavily overshadowed by these issues. So again, I'm hoping that DICE and EA learned a lot from 2042 and how it worked out this time, and I hope that they do not do it again, and instead do a lot better next time. Alright guys, but that was it for today. I know I could have talked about a lot more in this video, but these are just my personal final thoughts to 2042. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to drop a like. If you want to share your own thoughts, write them down in a comment below. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Until then, thanks for watching and thanks to my members for the additional support. I'm Catwoman and you are awesome.